Okay, can I call you together again? We're just going to spend a moment, perfect timing there, Alan. Peter, if you'd take your seat. We're just going to hear a very quick response from our panel, from the politician and the academic who are here, and then we'll throw it open to yourself. So, Alan, would you like to kick us off, and I'll jump in if you go anywhere near 5 minutes.
I won't go anywhere near 5 minutes, don't worry. Thank you, Christian, for that. It was a real eye-opener. I have to say, it was not what I was expecting this evening to be about. As Jerry knows, I was surprised when I got the invitation, because this is not anything in sort of my remit as a politician. However, I think one of the things that Christian mentioned on a number of occasions is control and command, which I think very eloquently sums up local governments, or did sum local governments up, certainly when I got involved. And it's a difficult cycle to break out of. But as a city council, we've taken significant steps, certainly since we took control 4 years ago, to try and involve our wider community in our decision-making processes, and to ensure that decisions that we are looking to make in terms of what is termed in the presentation as the Commons. When I saw that in the presentation, when it was emailed to me, I thought we were talking about the House of Commons, because it's not a language that we would use in terms of the Commons, but I understand, I think, it's the assets that the City Council has and the assets that the City Council is responsible for in terms of delivery and maintenance. We've worked significantly over the last 4 or 5 years to try and improve the public realm and the authorities' control. Certainly Steve and his colleagues in the parks and recreation areas have worked really hard to bring the standards of those up, working with local community groups. I think one of the biggest challenges for us when it comes to working on the commons areas as you described them is identifying the partners that we need to work with. I think many of the consultation exercises that we undertake, and it doesn't matter what the exercise is about, if it's about parks, it's about libraries, swimming pools, education provision, when we go to consultation, we hold meetings, the same 10 people turn up. Irrespective of what the issue is, it's the same people who think they are the people that we should consult with, and it's getting past that barrier and having a genuine dialogue and conversation with our residents, with our partners, with our businesses, with our colleges, universities and schools, to try and deliver the best we can in the reducing circumstances that we've got. I think one of the best examples of what we've tried to do and deliver in recent months was part of the austerity that we've faced as a city council. We've had a huge amount of our resources reduced by central government decisions, which put pressure on us in terms of frontline services. So things that our public take for granted, but aren't things that we have to deliver, because there are statutory services that we have to provide by law, and there are services that we provide because they think they're beneficial to our residents and our publics. One of those is libraries. Now, it's a frontline service, it's very expensive, it's something that we would love to keep to the level that it was, but we recognised that if we wanted to provide adequate services to our vulnerable, which is children and adults in social services, which is our biggest spend, we had to do something around libraries. We went out to consultation, we spoke to community groups, we put options out there. We've now got libraries being run on a collaborative basis by community organisations, which we couldn't do in the past. So we've tried to work down that route. I think the challenge for us, and it's a huge challenge in my opinion, is to go to the level that you're talking about in terms of what's being taken place in Italy and mainland Europe. I think the constraints on local governments in terms of what we can and cannot do legally in terms of our commons would be prohibited by legislation, so we'd have to be very careful. But we are moving towards a more open type of government. As Jerry said at the beginning, the committee that I chair, constitutional issues, deals with many of the issues around, as it says, the constitution of the council, how we deal with our public, how we become a vehicle for change. And since we took control, Mayor Anderson is very clear in what he wanted me to do. He wanted to make our government as open and accessible as possible. And we've done that. We've increased membership of opposition members on committees far and above what they are entitled to legally. We've made them open to the public. We have public question time. All our meetings are open. In fact, there's a couple from the Wirral who, since the government's changed and made it eligible to be videoed, a couple now actually come to virtually every single committee that we have. And there's an online blog that they do, and they basically film everything we do and put it online. So every committee we have, every full city council meeting is online. So we're trying to engage our communities as best we can. I'm not sure how it would go down, taking it to the cabinet to say we want to go as far as Christian Song, because I think that is a step change that we would need to seriously consider. But you know, we are open to views and open to challenges, and certainly open to good ideas. And I think some of the ideas that have come out of this programme are well worth looking at.
Thanks, Alan. Peter.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. I should admit that I'm a complete and utter fan of this kind of thing. I've been in cities which I call cities in motion, or cities full of societies in motion, like Buenos Aires in 2002 after the financial crisis, where people are meeting in squares and on street corners to make decisions themselves. I've been in Barcelona, taking students there every year, where Barcelona en Comú have just come out of the struggles of the mortgage holders in Barcelona. And they're trying to build a city that's inclusive, that's involving people, cutting the salary of the mayor down to the average wage of an ordinary Barcelona person. Struggling with getting things done, but doing a lot. Just saying, I was in Rome last year in a place called Officine Zero, which has been taken over by people in a place that closed down when they stopped using night trains. Talking about a city where ordinary people should have the rights to that city, so if buildings are not being used by the private sector, the community takes them over and tries to do things. When I was in Thessaloniki just this weekend in Greece, with lots of organisations from the social and solidarity economy. So I'm a total fan of that. I think the other side is, and I think we heard this from our political representative, is that a councillor would say, and they'd be right to say, that's great for those that are engaged. Certain places where there's financial crises, everybody's on the streets because you've got no option. Other places like Liverpool, we're perhaps suffering a long, slow death, and people are internalising the crisis. They're thinking it's their fault if they're unemployed, rather than they're flipping angry that the government is cutting the funding that's going on there. So a councillor would say, what about those that don't have the time to participate, those that don't want to participate? A councillor must speak up for those people, perhaps a single mum that doesn't have the time to go along to these. They've got their interests that they need to be thought through. But I think there are many ways that you can engage people in these kind of decision making. But there needs to be two things for me. One, there needs to be a will from politicians to run things that way. And I think in Liverpool we are seeing that to some extent. You mentioned the libraries. We can also talk about, if you go through Toxteth, you'll see areas where there's small community gardens being set up there. If you take that further, you look at places like incredible edible Todmerton, where there's lots of people engaging in growing food in the community. So there needs to be that kind of will to see that happen. And I know we're supposed to be friendly in an environment like this, but I get the feeling in Liverpool that these ideas aren't taken seriously. What you get is the creation of mayoral commissions to look at, say, green spaces or the environment, which might be thought of as actually kicking issues into the long grass, rather than finding ways to really engage people and setting up a long-scale programme where you're really including people. We did some work recently where we looked at what's happening in New York City with the previous mayor looking to create a sustainable city. And again, that was, taken up very nice, but the city's not taking that seriously. In all reality, given austerity, you can understand why. So that's fine. But I think the other side is there needs to be communities that want to do this. There needs to be this society in motion where it isn't the usual suspects that turn up. Now, when it is just the same people turning up, then councillors are quite right to say, well, who do you represent apart from yourself? And that they're right to say that. I don't know what it is about places like Barcelona or places like Rome or Buenos Aires, but whenever I've been to those places, I've been absolutely impressed with the seriousness of which the people engaged in these processes take it. they're really skilled at it. They listen to each other. They don't shout at each other. You don't get the same person making the 20-minute political speech. People are talking to each other. In Barcelona, they make sure that if the first person that speaks is male, the second person should be female. They talk about the right to the city. Everybody's got a right to be included. In Britain, we tend to say a city needs to pay its way. It needs to look at business. It needs to have convention centres. It needs to have capitals of culture. And it does, because that's the reality of the world we live in. But we don't spend the time thinking about ways that we can really get people working on this. And I think it's something, just one more minute, I think it's something that in Britain, we're really bad at. One of the academics that I really like is a guy called John Holloway, and he argues that we need to spend less of our time talking about what they should do for us, but more time developing our capacity to do things for ourselves, which we're not good at. Because of the legacy with the best intentions of the 1945 welfare state, we're in a country where we still expect people to do things for us, and we don't. So rather than the mayoral commission on the environment, I would love to see an office for civic imagination that's really working with communities and saying, let's take this forward. And I'm sure the university, I absolutely believe the university is a commons. I don't believe the University of Liverpool is in the private sector. I think it's the third sector, it's a commons institution. And I would love to see the University of Liverpool getting involved with that. So thank you for your challenge to us. And I think it's something that we should really take seriously. I hope there is the political will to do that. Steve?
Thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you very much, both of you, for your responses there. Over to yourselves. Questions, comments, discussion, debate.
I'm Tom. Thanks very much for 3 really interesting contributions. I'm glad you raised libraries, because I think, for me, listening to the first speech, that was the first thing that crossed my mind as a kind of obvious example. And if I understand right, as you say, a lot of it has gone into kind of community or volunteer management. I just wonder what kind of structures have you adopted with the libraries? What kind of relationship do they have with the council now? And what have you found are the things that have gone well, things that haven't gone so well, and any lessons for potentially other services or other councils?
I think what's happened with the libraries has been a success. I mean, certainly the one up in, is it Croxteth, where University's taken over? Really positive impact, providing services that we didn't provide before. It's far more a hub rather than a library. Our libraries were basically buildings with books in, the occasional PC, 1 or 2 PCs, and that was about it. The turnover through the door was very low. What they've done up there is actually made it a community facility, which is something that we were keen to see. I think that's been a real success. Another one that I should have picked up on before was, and I think you touched on it, certainly in the area I represent, Toxteth, green open space. We had lots of green open space where there used to be buildings. It's now, the buildings have gone, it's being grassed. It's not public domain, but it's grassed. Steve and his colleagues got consistent requests from organisations. Why can't we do something? Why can't we make flower gardens? Why can't we have allotments? And a lot of the areas have now get turned into allotments where they're being used by the local community, producing goods that they can use because, you know, as we all know, austerity has hit everybody hard. So there's been some really positive successes. It's not to say that we won't go down that route again, because in the next 4 years we've got to make £90 million worth of savings. Steve and his colleagues in the cabinet are working on that at the minute. I don't envy that job. I've stayed well away from finance in my 28 years on the council. I don't want to be involved in it because I find it just unbelievably difficult to get your head around. But the fact that we've got to make those savings is inevitable. We can't get away from it. It's not going to change. And that will impact on the services that we currently provide. And we will have to talk to organisations about, can we share, can we let you take over and deliver the service that we currently do, maintaining the level that we'd like to see, and obviously maintaining terms and conditions for our staff who are on living wage.
Okay, we're going to do the Barcelona thing. I've got 3 men waiting to ask questions, 1, 2 and 3, but we'll go for a woman first. And then another woman after next man, so girls get each other.
Sometimes it's lovely to be a woman. Thank you, Jerry, for that. I really wanted to ask Christian, following up on a point that Pete made about, and Councillor Dean actually, about the same people being involved when we ask people to be involved in the governance of place, if you like. I always worry that initiatives like this, which I completely adore, I think it's wonderful, might actually work to increase equity gaps, because the people who you want to really involve and where you want the imagination to come from to solve really, really difficult problems probably don't come because their lives are so stressful and difficult that they're not able to do that. So some kind of ideas around how you actually increase that collaborative capacity so that it's more equitable, I think would be really useful.
I'll go straight. Okay. Yeah. That's why I put this. They do not have to come. We go to them. So it means that we, at least, the methodological protocol that I handed over foresees that the Office for Civic Imagination designs these experimentation grounds to address the social divides and the implementation of the right to the city, so that they need to go. They do not have to stay in City Hall. So these are, for instance, if you wanna, this is Piazza dei Colori. You see the three markers. There are three outskirts of Bologna. Bologna is where you see Bologna. That's the historic center. And the three markers are all in three outskirts neighborhood, in three outskirts basically. So it's where the real problems are. So I specifically designed my experimentations that led to the design then of the Office for Civic Imagination in order to address basically, in this case, three main issues. The problem with young jobless people. That's Pilastro, where we created a community co-op with the help of a newly created agency that is going to have the Quintuple Helix as a governance scheme. Then in Piazza dei Colori, which is this picture, where this picture is from, you see it's basically the commercial spaces that were completely abandoned of a public housing compound. 60% of foreign people that are completely, basically, away from any kind of participatory process, and that's what I want to say, as this is the difference between participation and collaboration. And this is instead in Bolognina, which is in another public housing compound, and then this is the garden, the shared garden, that we opened up in one of the few private buildings. So we convinced the private owners of the private owned building to open up this shared space to also the public housing, the people from the public housing, because they would not have a shared space where to live, because it was designed not to have a public space. So basically the suggestion and the guideline that I gave is that the experimentations and the issues that we need to face, they have to be those that address the equity gaps. And we need to go there. They do not have to come to us. It's different from participation. It's different also because it's not just about having them to say something about some public decision. No, it's about creating institutional and economic diversity in the city. It's about creating jobs, it's about creating enterprises, it's about creating new forms of urban democracy. So it's not participation as it used to be. I think it's a form of participation, but it is a way to create new social and economic and political institutions in the city.
Okay, that was wonderful. Sorry, can we just...
Just a quick one, just on numbers. How many people are involved in those groups?
It depends on the experimentation. In this case, we're at least 30 people here. fewer people here because it was much harder to involve the single inhabitants. In Pilastro is a much wider, it's hundreds of people, and we are creating a community co-op at least of 300 people. And we are evaluating, yeah? So as I said before, it's not perfect. We had failures. We are proud of our failures because we restart the process from our failures. These experimentations that led to the Office for Civic Imaginations built on the failures of the regulation. Because through my empirical observation, I realized that we were not addressing the equity gaps that were mentioned before. And I said, if you want me to keep working on the ground as a scholar and as a professor with you, we need to restart the process facing and admitting the failures of the regulation. Now, I cannot say it's a complete failure because we are still in the process of evaluating. We are handing over a questionnaire to the 245 packs of collaboration, but you can, keep my word for true if I say that there were some failures in the regulation, and these failures were also addressed. And we made, mistakes also in this. And in fact, we are restarting the process. And I'm thinking of new fixes.
Okay, that wasn't a quick one.
Sorry about that.
We'll keep to the routine. Just such a breath of fresh air to hear someone like Christian talk so candidly and relaxed about failure. We don't hear that very much.
Thanks. I want to ask, I'm Eric Bichard from Real Worth. I want to ask all three of you about the significance of money and budgetary control on co-governance. So let me illustrate that by the fact that a couple of years ago I was in Porto Alegre, city in Brazil. Was looking at the social and environmental return on investment of a public housing scheme that not only gave slum dwellers a better roof over their heads, but also social service support, green spaces, skills and training, a whole raft of things to improve their lives as well as their physical conditions. And that scheme was part of their deliberative democracy process, where 18% of the city's budget every year is a result of people's panels demanding the city spend on the things that the citizens want. They work very hard at it. It isn't an annual thing. There's dozens of committees. They work every month. They look at local and citywide issues, and at the end it's voted on collectively, and they also pitch to each other to try to convince each other of their ideas. So, question, could co-governance ever work without some form of control on budgets, and could it work in a city like Liverpool?
And can we have brief answers? Christian, we'll start with you and then we'll go to our panelists.
These cities do have participatory budgeting. I don't exclude that at some point these practices could merge. What I would say in this phase is that the difference between participatory budgeting and this kind of approach is that it's not just participating to the allocation of money. It's the city putting some money. For instance, Office for Civic Imagination is going to manage 40 million euros from EU fundings through this approach. So it's the city that is going to use this money to start this kind of initiatives that are going to be funded, with this approach. It's not deciding just the allocation of public spending that is then going to be spent by the city government on some projects that the citizens have decided they like better than others. It's more about investing, public investment in these co-governance schemes. I don't know if I made sense, but I can.
Peter, 2 minutes, too short.
Yes, it's obviously fundamental. I remember when I was in my 20s, I was a civil servant for my sins, And I went on the training course, and there was somebody from the Treasury telling me why it was absolutely necessary for central government to tell councils how many paper clips they could spend on whatever it was. And I, like the naive young 25-year-old I was, I said, well, how do federal states go there? Surely if New Hampshire wants to have an income tax, New Hampshire has an income tax, and Washington's got nothing to do with that. And of course, he didn't have an answer to that. You know, we've got to admit, we've got to remember we are in one of the most centralised countries in the entire world. We're in one of the most neoliberalised cities in countries in the whole world. So we think about our cities as businesses. We want to know the price of everything rather than about democracy. The other side, we've got the business rates are now going to be retained locally, and I'd like to know what Jed Fitzgerald knows about whether Liverpool's going to be better off as a result of all the great investments that have been in the city centre, or whether we're going to be even more stuffed than we are. I think I probably know the answer to that. There's also lots of, we're talking about the social and solidarity economies. One of the things I'm very interested in is alternative currencies. And I think there's lots of things in Italy with time banking, things like the Bristol pound, the Brixton pound. There's lots of things that we can do to have our own forms of money generation locally and keep more of the money we spend generating locally. And funnily enough, that might be a little bit more easier given Brexit, so I'm not slitting my throat over Brexit at all. There could be lots of opportunities for more local production and more money circulation in the future coming out of Brexit as an unintended good consequence.
Alan?
From our point of view, I think it's when we go to the table in a collaborative way, what we bring to the table are our assets. And by and large, that's what we use when we're trying to work with other organisations, work with partner agencies to deliver things. The resources that we have are extremely limited and becoming even less on a day-to-day basis. So when we work with partners, what we can bring to the table is what we own, what we can use as leverage. By and large, when we get into partnerships with organisations, we can't put that much into the pot in terms of cash. It's not within our gift at the minute, and it's not looking like it's going to change anytime soon. We would love to be in a better position in terms of our rates. We would love to be in a position where we raise the revenue for ourselves. We're not allowed to do that the way European countries are. We're basically dependent on central government, and the rateable value in Liverpool is far less than anywhere else. And when it changes, it's our opinion that we're going to lose significantly. So it's not going to get better for us. But any organisation that wants to talk to the city about taking things forward and working in a better way, the Mayor's office is always willing to listen to those proposals. But by and large, people come to say, we've got this fabulous idea, and it'll only cost you £5 million. There's the door.
Okay. Sorry, there's a question there. We're going to take a woman. Yes, thank you. And then back down to, and then we're down to Steve. Sorry.
I'm Emma. I'm a lecturer in architecture in the university, but I'm also involved in kind of cooperative activist things in Manchester to do with the built environment. So I'm like some of these other people have said, I'm kind of convinced by a lot of this, but with its sort of current application often in the UK, what I'm concerned about is that without this kind of co-governance conversation, actually what we're doing is participating in asset stripping, and I think especially with the way that you're talking, it's not an accusation, but the way, it alarms me to hear that the council thinks that their contribution to this is assets only, in a sense, because I don't know, we want those assets to remain in common, I suppose. And whilst that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be owned and controlled by the council, I don't know, I suppose I'm just nervous about this can be sometimes co-opted as a way to reduce public services, reduce public ownership, and actually not, and again, with the same 10 people, whilst I'm sometimes one of those 10 people, and I know that there are ways of getting more people by leaving the room and going to the people, because I've done it myself. Some communities have got more of that social capital than others, and when it comes to running a library, some communities maybe don't have the capacity to do that. So I suppose the question is, how do we make sure that we do this in a positive way and not a negative way?
When I said that we take to the table our assets, if the venture fails, the assets come back. We're not that naive. I mean, if we genuinely sell something, like we're looking to do with municipal buildings, we sell it for the money. And it's an overcapacity of building space that we've got, so we're looking to downsize that, because our staff has downsized significantly. So we will sell surplus buildings, municipal buildings. We hope will bring a significant amount of money into the coffers. But when we get into joint ventures and we use our assets, whether it's land, buildings, if that fails, it's always in the contract that it comes back to us. We don't just say to an organisation, don't do something, they fail and they give it to somebody else, or they keep it. It doesn't work that way. I think that was the concern.
Okay. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, just to say that this idea came out of also a sort of criticism of this approach that you guys call big society. And the idea of co-governance is saying it's not self-governance. So you go and do it by yourself. We, the public, get out of the picture. No. In fact, as I mentioned before, one of the aspects important is that the city is investing money, is putting money, is not taking money out of it. So the idea is to adding more energy in order to keep the same level and maybe improve the level of the quality of public services and maybe generate revenues just because the city become more thriving because of that. And this is happening. So I think that cities should be considered nowadays, and they are considered by public policy scholars as the future economic agglomerates where development and progress is going to happen. So the mayor is not anymore just the representative of citizens, is also someone that has to reason like a person that needs to foster economic development and not wait just for the money that is coming from either tax or from the national government. They need to be able to leverage the four actors in order to coalesce them around a local community economic development scheme and project.
Thanks, Christian. This might have to be the last question.
Not quite a question, but since I've been decided, Steve Mumby, I'm a member of the Council Cabinet and responsible for parks, green spaces and other things. I'm going to be a bit of a wind-up merchant. I think there are two fundamentally different approaches to reimagining the state. One, which I call icing on the neoliberal cake, is sort of the one that focuses on governance and consultation, and I think it's reflected in, for example, the attempt to revive participatory budgeting, the Porto Alegre model. The Liberal Democrats did that a few years ago in Liverpool, and it involved 15 or 20 people sitting in a room deciding on how small pots of money were made. The approach which I think we're trying to pursue, which I think is much more based in political economy, is trying to think about how you can reimagine the state, taking account of real financial issues. And there's four aspects of that which we've focused on. The first one is about buildings, which applies to libraries, youth centres, the works. And essentially, buildings cost the council a lot to run. If you transfer them to the voluntary sector, you get those costs off your books, but the voluntary sector gets rent-free buildings, the community gets access to rent-free buildings. So it's viable, it's a practical solution. The second one is to do with derelict land sites. We've created over about 150 community gardens in the city since we took over. And basically those are costs to the city. Even if they're private land that's derelict, there's often costs of clearing that land. But if you can organise a community garden or allotment, you create a community asset and you get a cost off your books. The third one, which is different but is equally important in a context of redesign of state, is what we've done with getting rid of some of the private contracts the City Council has, where we've moved private contracts away from services, street cleaning, the bins, into a local authority trading company, and actually working with the trade union save money. The fourth one, which is kind of an odd one, but is quite interesting, is the work we've done in North Liverpool, which is also all of these, work for us financially and have to, because we've got, 60% less money than we had 5 years ago. We run match day car parks around match days on derelict land. We've created a community interest company in North Liverpool which turns over 300,000-400,000 a year. What we use that for, there was real pressure to invest in community groups. We've actually resisted that, and we're using it for really investment capital for mainly young people, but others who are starting up businesses from North Liverpool. And we buy a share in the business, but give them money to trade. We're also joining government. So in that case, it's an odd thing of using a community space to create investment capital for the private sector, but it's not like big capital, it's like local business startups. But each of those have a financial basis. The difficulty of focusing on the governance structures, I think, for us is partly time. Secondly, I think a lot of the models of governance were based on community organisations, mass organisations, which frankly haven't existed for 20, 30 years. And it's much more I've got much more of a focus on how do you work with credit unions, how do you work with allotments, how do you work with organisations to deliver services for them to appropriate services, rather than engaging in elaborate consultation exercise. And there is a tension there between how you spend your time.
I'm sorry, I'm clock watching. You can ask your question at the end. Kristen, do you want to have a final word responding to Councillor Mumby?
No, just to the last remark about, also because it's a remark that popped up in the conversation. These people do not have time. You're right. They do not have time. They do not have time to waste because the crisis has hit very hard. So that's why participation, if it's not geared towards the construction of new forms of jobs, new forms of ventures, and it's not gonna, gain momentum and gain speed. So these people really do not have time to fantasizing or deciding greater issues. They need to, and they also, and actually the anthropology, it was the anthropology of these movements, and before it was mentioned Barcelona en Comú and the seriousness. I liked it, because of course they are serious, because they think, and I agree with them, they are at the forefront of a new economic paradigm. So they are transforming economy. They are the first one who understood the importance of open production. Wikipedia. Think about Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a commons, is a knowledge commons. Do you think that Wikipedia is voluntary, is just something that is altruism? Do you think that Wikipedia is not an economic value? How many ventures and how many information and how many media rely heavily on Wikipedia? When are we going to when are we going to give an economic dimension and economic value to Wikipedia? So Wikipedia is an infrastructure. How many businesses, how many market ventures are run on the basis of commons? We don't see it, but IBM and Microsoft as well, they are running on commons. Android is running on commons, because Linux and all the digital collaboratives that are producing software, open software, they are preparing new forms of economic venture. And at some point, even Google stopped fighting against them, because they say, look, they are a value, they are an asset to us. They, in fact, many of the Google apps and many of these apps and softwares that are created on a proprietary basis, they build on open licenses. So it's just the same discussion and the same conversation that we need to bring from the digital world to the real world, to the analogical world. I think that this is important, and I stress the fact that these people and this world, this transition, this new paradigm, is not something that has to do just with participation, and it has to do with a social, economic, and institutional transition process that is happening, and that in few years might lead to a new dimension of the state, to a new dimension of the market. As much as cooperatives and mutuality ventures gave birth to basically the welfare state, there is this beautiful book from one of your connational, David Graeber, who, The Utopia of Rules, I suggest you to read it. He describes how the welfare state was designed by mirroring the inner workings of mutuals and co-ops, and because at some point Bismarck understood the importance of creating a welfare state, otherwise they would have created a parallel state, and they would have taken over power, and they would have taken. So I think that we are preparing the new market and a new state, and this is serious. I agree, it's serious.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Christian. I think tonight's been one of the most powerful experiences we've had. I just want to thank everyone who's made the series possible, particularly our sponsors. I'd like to thank the people in the venue here at the Victoria Gallery Museum, and especially Julia, who's from Heseltine Institute, and Rhiannon, who've been absolutely marvellous, enabling tonight to take place at all in this venue. I'd like to thank Councillor Alan Dean and Dr. Peter North for their participation in the panel, and of course Christian Yayone for being an extraordinary speaker tonight. I'd like to thank Rachel in the corner from Nonconform and all the work they've done to support the seminar series. Joe Campbell on video there, who's creating a video record of these 3 events, and they'll be uploaded to our website pretty quickly. Members of the Engage Board who are here tonight helping things to go smoothly, and residents and stakeholders who are here for not asking for a refund. Well, those of you who didn't ask for a refund. It's been really important to us. This is the first year we've been asking for some level of contribution to enable Engage to keep doing its work. And I'm grateful for those of you who are prepared to pay even a small amount to come tonight. And we're going to give you a free gift. Some of you have been before, will already have one, but please feel free to. We've produced a booklet called 10 Words, which is about engaging with the city creatively. I love the idea of civic imagination. Well, this was a very imaginative civic project. We give these books away free to citizens who live in the city centre so that you can engage better with the reality of city centre living. So Rachel's going to give you one on the way out, and Graham as well. So please take one, and if you've got friends and you live in the city centre, take some for your neighbours where you are. A good excuse to knock on their door and say, I'm just giving you a free gift. What's your name? I'm whatever, Rachel, Jerry. So these are for free. And thank you to our sponsor who's made this print edition possible. And that's it. Thank you and good night to everybody.